for my reminder. I'm getting better. All right, so just to acknowledge that today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and I wanted to read a very short statement by the University of Michigan just to give you an idea of what U of M's role in today is all about. So let me find that. Okay. This is, when you get the PowerPoint, it's also going to be a statement at the bottom of your PowerPoint, so you can pull that up as well. There's an additional statement at the bottom of that PowerPoint that goes beyond U of M if you want to learn more about the history of why we're celebrating today. But this is about U of M in particular. So the University of Michigan began with a gift of land by the Native people. In 1817, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and forgive me if I am not pronouncing all of these correctly, Potawatomi, Shawnee, and Wendat, or Huron, owned most of what is now Michigan's Lower Peninsula. In the fall of that year, a treaty was signed at Fort Meigs, Ohio, near what is now Toledo, between Michigan's territorial governor, Lewis Cass, and the Quote Indians. In the treaty process, Governor Cass persuaded the Quote Indians to cede 3,800 acres of land, half of which was to go to St. Anne's Church and half for a college at Detroit, in which, again, Quote Indians would be eligible to enroll. While the territory had been planning a statewide school system built around a university, no specific funds had been allocated nor officers appointed. The territorial government now hastened to formalize their plans in order to assure their eligibility for the college land. The act that founded the university was drafted by Judge Augustus Woodward, Father Gabriel Richard, and Reverend John Montieth. Officers were appointed and a building was built in Detroit in 1821, but no classes were held because there were no, quote, qualified students. In 1837, some land developers in Ann Arbor offered 40 acres on the edge of town if the university would move. The original native gift land was sold, and Michigan courts have since held that the proceeds of that sale remain part of the permanent endowment of the University of Michigan. Note that early seals of the university show the founding date as 1837. That was before the university proved in court that the original donation of 1817 has remained intact in the university's accounting of its funding sources. That was a lot of legalese for we took land from folks, never gave them anything in return, and here we are 200 years later. All right, so with that being said, today's journey, we've got Janae, as always, who's going to lead us in a Kahoot. Again, we'll be talking about SDT today, so we'll try to combine as much theory and practice as possible today. And then a quick group activity and some time at the end to really talk out the one-pager just to make sure that we're all on the same page. All right, Janae, take it away with our Kahoot.
Okay. Pin is loading. Okay, so here's the game pin. 1572046. All right. 2, 1. All right. Which is not one of the 8 behaviors teachers do that is autonomy supportive? Acknowledging students' perspectives, making time for independent work, creating teams for student teamwork, encouraging questions. Okay, about half and half. Okay, cool. So essentially, the idea is that teamwork may not support student. What is the major assumption that SDT makes about humans? Humans are naturally curious. Humans have a tendency to learn and develop. Humans are always learning. Humans thrive in niches that are created for them.
Quickly answer, y'all. What's maybe a frozen screen or computer?
Maybe. All types of choice are associated with people experiencing autonomy. True or false? So Kahoot is weird. I think when like the majority of people answer, it may like move on to the next question. I'll look into that because that's weird. There were like 35 people that answered ish. Okay, so people answered this one. This one came out all right. Which theory argues that for healthy development to unfold, individuals require support for basic psychological needs? Social determination theory, SDT, social cognitive theory, SCT, both A and B, so both social determination theory and social cognitive theory, or none of the above. Okay. There's some work to be done. We're gonna get there. What are the core features of human agency in social cognitive theory? Intentionality, forethought, self-reactiveness, and self-reflectiveness, or all of the above? Okay, good job, team. Dr. Anderson, I like this little thing you just did. Yay, team. All right. The three basic needs, fundamental in social determination theory, SDT, are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. True or false? Okay, cool. Look at us. Okay. Yay, guys. Efficacy beliefs are solely focused on personal agency. True or false? We kind of talked about self-efficacy earlier in the class too, so that might be helpful to think about that. Okay. Which of the following is not an attribute of intrinsic motivation? Interest, enjoyment, inherent satisfaction, rewards, or punishments? So the idea here is that like with intrinsic motivation, rewards and punishment are more so like extrinsic motivating factors. So that would not be intrinsic as something like just simple motivation would be. So SDT recognizes that an individual can be simultaneously, intrinsically, and extrinsically motivated. True or false? Okay. Wonderful. Let's see who's on the podium. Okay, Alex. Hey, Emma. Zoe? Yeah. Okay. Go team.
Did you want to do a quick acknowledgement of the assignments or?
Yes, I almost forgot. I have a couple of notes. So you guys have been doing great with the assignments. The class average is in the 90s for both assignments, the Twitter and the infographic assignment. So great job, everyone. Just wanted to give you guys a few reminders. So just make sure that in the future you guys are following directions as closely as possible. So for example, if we say that we want you guys to include one citation, include like a full APA citation, such as like how you would include a citation in a reference list or a bibliography. Purdue OWL has some really great examples. And then just in general, like it's important to cite so that the public will listen to what you're saying and sort of like understand that you're receiving information from reputable sources when you are like actually using an infographic, like, you know, in the real world, in the field. Also, be sure to proofread your work when submitting. Some professors will actually like take off points for this. Of course, like I didn't, but just something to be cognizant of. Also, when we say like include at least one infographic and up to 5, or when we say like include a Twitter thread, which includes like 5 to 10 tweets, make sure that like you actually stay within that range. So like make sure you do the minimum. So if we say like 5 tweets, like make sure you include 5, but no more than 10, and that sort of thing. We also want to make sure that, like, when we say that we want you all to make mention or to address each construct of a theory, make sure that you explicitly address all of those constructs. So, for example, for the infographic, for the theory of play and behavior, excuse me, sorry. For the theory of play and behavior, the infographic should have explicitly addressed subjective norms, attitudes, and perceived control. So like, you know, make sure you actually touch on each of those 3 and don't just pick like attitudes and focus on that. Actually address each 3 of those in either one infographic or either in multiple. I see Tasneem has a question about citations. So you guys, like, we weren't like explicit as to where you should include the citation for the assignment. So some people included like a references list. Some people included a comment with citations. Some people even included like just a 1-line like APA citation on the graphic. If I saw any sort of citation, you guys got the point. And then I decided to be lenient. So even if people like included like a random CDC URL or a QR code, I was like, okay, well, obviously we weren't clear enough here. So I gave you guys points for that. But yes, Taz, like it's fine to like put it in the comment section, but I think it's good practice to get into the habit of actually putting it on the infographic so that like if you're using it like on a New York subway, people can like look and see like, oh, like they have a graphic about mask wearing. Oh, is CDC informed? Oh, okay, this must be reputable.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Like for that's what I'm saying. So like on my infographic, I didn't have any points taken off obviously, but I just want to like know like just in general to like make my work like more reputable, I guess. Like, so if I said, oh, the CDC states X, Y, and Z, is that like enough of like a citation like in the real world, and then like put my like APA format citation in the comments, or should I put that also like should I put both on there like on my on an infographic, if that makes sense.
I think it's just simply based on preference. I think people would say that that in itself is sufficient to say, like, according to the CDC, yada, yada. But like the nerdy researcher in me and the public health person likes to be able to actually see like, oh, CDC 2020, if they use the MMWR report that was in February of 2020, oh, okay, bet. Like I can go back and refer to this and I can find it to pull up where the actual information came from. So I would say it's better to be more explicit than not. You know, you don't have to include like a whole 15 references page on the infographic, but you know, just like a key reference is always pretty clutch and helpful to see.
All right, thank you.
I'll just support that, Janae. My mother is always saying, they say blah, blah, blah. And at this point, she knows that I'm going to say, who is they? And she has to cite her source because it's not going to bode well with me, her nerdy daughter. Like, you got to cite your source. So certainly you don't want like the entire reference to be smack in the middle of something because the average reader is not going to know enough about that. But if it's on the bottom, I'm absolutely on that train in New York. Like, what's that citation? So I'm with you on that. All right, thank you so much for that, Janae. We're just gonna hold questions, if you don't mind, to the end. We have a jam-packed schedule, so let's get into it. Also, just a quick fun fact, Janae said that she likes when I did this. This is actually American Sign Language, so you can learn something new today if you did not know that. That means yay. So that's your word for the day in ASL, which I took at the University of Michigan. Go Blue, okay, great. All right, let's get back into our, what is this called? A PowerPoint, which is perfect timing. So acknowledging the halfway point, my mind is absolute just at this point. So for those of you that understand that this is exactly where we are right now, if you have not seen this meme, this kind of perfectly describes where I think we all are. So I know that you all are just trying to keep it together. I too am just trying to keep it together, Janae as well. So we absolutely appreciate, we've received a few notes from students about your experience in this class. We really appreciate all feedback, but certainly this has been positive and we really appreciate that from students. So please feel free to keep that coming. And of course, if you have other things that you want to say that aren't so positive, we will be listening. But over the next few weeks, we will be engaging in some evaluations, one within this class, one I think that the school public health is going to send independently. So please absolutely share your comments there. It's going to be the same refrain you hear for the next few weeks, that your voice is your vote. So if you're not able to, say something about it, we can't improve, nor do we know how awesome we're being. So please let us know in those evaluations, but we really appreciate the individual comments and emails that we've received as well. So thank you. We're all just trying to hold it together and we acknowledge that. And we certainly hope that you and yours are well at this time. So we're going to do just a quick stretch break because this is supposed to be a fall break. We're supposed to be out gallivanting and like reading on the lawn or just, picking some apples or something. So just a quick stretch break. Janae, I see your arms moving. Kate and Emma, just because I can see you on my screen, I don't see arms moving. So give me a leg or an arm or a neck stretch, something. Yes. Over the next few days, I want you all to also engage in some meditation, engage in some baths, like whatever it is that makes your heart sing. This is the halfway point and we are running a marathon unlike ever before in so many ways, but also because Michigan has not given us a break at this time. So this is really, again, unprecedented. So please ensure that you are taking care of yourself at this time. All right, that being said, let's keep rolling. All right, so let's come off mute. Let's open up the chat. I want to know what the main ingredients of health-related behaviors are. And I'm going to preface this by saying right before you jump in, a student and I were able to talk after class a few weeks ago about this idea of a pie. And for any folks that know or watch me as Janae is doing the Kahoot, I am scarfing down my lunch. So I'm always thinking about food. It's very important for me. And I do love sweets, so pie is cool. But pies also represent, in a statistical way, the sum of all things. So when we talk about the variance, when you all have been learning in your stats class, what R squared is or what the variance is of something, you can have a pie that can represent 100% of something And in this case, we're talking about the variance between people engaging in certain behaviors. And if we want to explain that variance, we want to talk about why it is that we would see differences in the ways that people perform certain behaviors. We would want to know some of the ingredients from some of the theories that we've discussed already. So the past few weeks, we've been discussing about theories. There are ingredients or constructs that you've been learning about that are going to fill that knowledge of why there is variance in behavior. So come off mute, go into the chat, tell me what the ingredients are that we've been learning about thus far that explain that variance in health-related behaviors. All right, Lauren, or we've got attitudes, autonomy, reward and punishment, SES, that's motivation, education, policy, barriers, norms, control, self-efficacy, intention. You all are smack on it, fantastic. So some folks are also bringing in not just some of the constructs, but some of the larger levels of influence, like Emma just said. So hold on to that as we keep going. And I see that you all are still in the chat. Keep rolling, keep rolling. So the question is, what's missing? What ingredients are we lacking? So some folks have already started talking about some of the things that we would be learning about, quote, this week. If you hadn't, done the readings, or if you hadn't prepared for this week, we would be adding a dollop, as you see, of that fantastic whipped topping on that pie. So we're adding more ingredients in this week that are going to help us to understand what in that pie is explaining this difference, what's explaining this variance. So I want to go back to what it is that we talked about a few weeks ago for our organizational framework, just to give you an idea of where we're shifting for this class and the subsequent 3 or 4. So we've just completed the individual elements. So some of the things that you all named with respect to attitudes or my self-perception, some of those things are my personal individual components that are going to shape why I behave or not. Now we're starting to move into this interpersonal area. So we saw this a few weeks ago, but we're starting to transition now into SDT and SCT this week. Next week, stress and coping and racism. So we're moving into how interpersonal components, like some of the levels that you all were talking about, some of the systems are creating change or creating difference in why I behave the way that I do. So again, if you just need a refresher of that, individual behaviors, as you all were already indicating, might be informed by knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Now that we're moving into the interpersonal realm, we're starting to understand how the aspect of family, friends, or social networks are going to impact why we do what we do. So not just the pie, not just the dollop on top, but people providing it, people baking it with love and care, people kind of giving expectation as to how much pie you should get. These are the things that we're starting to get into with the self-determination theory. So what specifically, the question one might ask is, what specifically would lead to positive motivation and experiences that enhance performance and well-being? That's a self-determination theory question. So let's get into what those elements are that would lead to positive motivation and experiences that enhance performance and well-being. All right, so this is the monster model that you may have seen before. And so the idea, what are those core ingredients to I'm just gonna say SDT because that's a long thing. So SDT are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And we've talked before about how arrows are important. So what this model is suggesting is that these elements of autonomy, competence, relatedness, these constructs don't live by themselves, they're informed by something. So they're informed by autonomy, supportive versus controlling health care, for example, climate, or personality differences, or intrinsic versus extrinsic life aspirations. So they're informed by things that aren't just my personal autonomy, competence, relatedness. So on the surface, it might look like when I say autonomy, I'm doing my own behavior. I know how I feel about how able I am to do this thing. But as you all saw, even for the Kahoot question, a teacher can inform what my autonomy is, right? Or these other elements that are going to inform extrinsic motivation, for example. These things are not just within me, they're being shaped by these other things. And then once I get a sense of my autonomy, my competence, my relatedness, that's going to help to predict, that's what those arrows mean, that's going to predict elements about my mental health, like less depression, less somatization, etc., and predict elements of physical health, like not smoking, exercising, weight loss, etc. So the more satisfied I am with those three constructs in the middle, autonomy, competence, and relatedness, the better health predictors I have with respect to things like mental health and physical health. Any questions, thoughts, or comments at this slide? This is the meat of it. So if this doesn't make sense, we need to just pause for a second. Okay, keep that in mind. If you have questions about it, let me know. We'll have some time at the end where I'll earmark. But essentially, the three elements that we need to be mindful of with this theory: autonomy, competence, relatedness. They predict our health behaviors, or the ways that we perceive our health or health changes. And we'll get to some practical examples of that as well. All right, so those three essential psychological needs, that was also a question on Kahoot. So the three essential psychological needs that folks are needing within this theory, again, perceived competence, which might otherwise be called self-efficacy, how well I'm able to do something, my ability to do something is competence. My autonomy, my choice, whether I'm going to do it or not, how autonomous I am to do that thing, and my relatedness, what's in my social environment, how related to that am I? Those are the three major ingredients of SDT. So if we think about motivation, we might define that as the energy, direction, or persistence to act, or the reasons why people act or not. So that's motivation from a larger scale: the energy, direction, or persistence to act, the reasons why people act. What's your motivation? And then there are degrees of it, right? So once we understand that motivation, like what it is at the high level, there are degrees. So let me break this down. Let me move our faces out the way. Move it. All right, so the first level, or that first grid, right, the first row, we're seeing motivation on a scale, on a continuum. So if you lack motivation, you might be amotivated. That is when you don't intend to do something, you don't value it. That's all the way to the left. All the way to the right is when you have an intrinsic form of motivation where it's personally important, you value it, and it's satisfying. And then within the middle, there are degrees as well. So extrinsic, you're complying with it, you're doing it, but you don't personally have an interest in it, right? You might get some sort of reward and punishment from it, but again, you don't have the motivation to just do it on your own. It's all being extrinsically motivating for you. Now, is that necessarily a bad thing? Absolutely not. So the way that people talk about jobs, for example, there are some jobs that people have, they're completely internally and intrinsically motivated by. I think professors will be nuts if they're not intrinsically motivated, because like the amount of work that we put in, like we're exhausted, all that jazz, it ain't the money, y'all. So we're doing it because we love y'all, we love the science, etc. So we are, I am personally, let me speak for myself, that's the only thing I can do. I'm intrinsically motivated to do what I'm doing. Do I get paid for it? Yes. For the people who say that money isn't a carrot at all, like that's hard to believe, right? Like at all. But there are some jobs, I'm watching The Office. I think I've already told you that. I'm binge watching that at night. So like the people at The Office are constantly talking about how Jim in particular is like extrinsically motivated. He's like, if I didn't get money, I would not be coming to this job. So it's not bad. It's just, again, degrees of it, right? And then in the middle of extrinsic and intrinsic, introjected. So some people have self-control. They are motivated by internal rewards and punishments, but maybe it's not fully intrinsic. So it'll, this again is a stage model in which you can move from amotivated to intrinsic based on your degree of motivation. That's that first row. An example of it in the second row, if you didn't engage in that behavior, if you were amotivated, you wouldn't care. If you were extrinsically motivated, you would feel like you were breaking the rules. So again, it's only about how other people might view that or how you're linked to the outside environment. If you're introjected, it might be that you're feeling guilty. So we're moving more inward, but intrinsic value really is about this idea of satisfaction. So I would feel unsatisfied if I weren't able to engage in that behavior. So that's, my motivation is tied to a feeling of satisfaction in that way. The final row gives us this continuum of individuals that would tend to have low self-efficacy, low autonomy, low relatedness if they were amotivated, all the way to high self-efficacy, high autonomy, or high relatedness on the intrinsic side. So this is just an idea of saying from amotivation to intrinsic motivation, there are degrees of what it may look like from left to right. If I didn't engage in it, this is what it would look like. And then these are the words that I might use to describe people who were along this continuum. Just checking the chat. Oh, Taz loves The Office. Indeed, I do as well. I'm on the last season. It really hurts. Okay. So I wanted to hear your voices, or at least read your words on this. So this is an example, just a way of seeing that continuum that we just talked about from a figure that was, I believe, in your readings, if not in one of the ones from last year that I didn't carry on. But this is, in my understanding, in a reading that you all had. So take a look at the continuum again from left to right, from amotivation to intrinsic, and just take a look at where the red circle is highlighting. So someone who is a little toward the self-determined side, is extrinsically motivated, etc. Can someone take a stab with respect to mask wearing, how you would describe this person? So tell me a bit about, and I'll go back to the prior slide. This kind of goes somewhere in this area, right? So tell me a bit about how you would describe this person with respect to mask wearing. Just give it a shot. Any words or thoughts that you would have about that person's motivation with mask wearing. Ramonda, are you talking to us? I see your mouth moving and I see you're off mute, but I can't hear you. We always have this problem with your mic. It's not, do you have a Bluetooth anywhere? It's not picking up. Whatever it is, it's not picking it up. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, wait.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I was just saying like someone who has like pre-existing conditions, or like they like are higher risk.
Okay, so excellent. Higher risk or pre-existing conditions that would make them.
So it'd be like punishments, so like they can get like severely sick maybe.
Awesome. Great job on that one. What else do you all see?
Maybe they would be differently motivated by like social pressures. So there's like the feel guilty part of it. So if, you know, there's that social pressure, then their own guilt would motivate them to wear a mask.
Awesome. Great, great. I'm seeing in the chat, we've got Taz saying maybe compliance due to policy, and then it's like they view it as a win-win because it's keeping them safe anyways. Great. Scott is indicating someone who wears a mask so that they can do things they like, such as going to gym, the movies, or restaurants. So it's not, that's right. It's still fairly internal. We haven't moved to like, it's something that's going to necessarily help others. So it's, I think that's a really great way of thinking about it as well. Maybe one other thing if folks see it. I think you all are answering it really well. Anybody else have a thought?
Maybe someone who's family member is at
I know. Michaela, I can't hear you either. What's going on? These AirPods.
see. Oh, I see why.
It's just Alien, like Terminator or T-Pain. Pick any of those.
That's great. Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Matt,
Okay.
Yep.
I was gonna say someone who family member is at high risk, so they like see why it's important. It might not be personally important to them yet, but they see why it's necessary.
Fantastic. Awesome. So these folks, you know, with respect to not efficacy, not blending words, self-efficacy, though, that is funny. Okay, self-efficacy, you know, they're going toward higher self-efficacy. So they're able to do it, right? We know that they can, and they are able to and are willing to do it. Is moving toward a sense of autonomy, but it's not quite there yet. So I think, as you all said beautifully, maybe it's policy, maybe it's because they want to do something in particular, maybe it's because they're protecting their health, but it's not all the way to the right yet. And again, if it's not about helping other people, then that relatedness aspect might be a bit lower here, particularly with mask wearing. So great work on that. Alrighty, I'm gonna actually breeze through these pretty quickly. So if you wanna make a note in your notes as however you're taking notes, I'm gonna include a number of things that one can do to move from one thing to the other. So in this case, how to move from internalizing to externalizing. I'm gonna list those here, but for sake of time, I'm gonna keep going through the slides. We're gonna actually deal with some tips that you're going to personally be able to read through with respect to mask wearing in particular. So that for me feels more important than kind of reading the more generic ones, but I'm going to include these generic ones so that you'll have them in your personal repertoire as a professional and as a practitioner. So how to move from internalizing to external would be here. How to enhance autonomy is here. How to enhance competence is here. And how to enhance relatedness is here. Again, we're going to be using some that are specific to COVID in just a bit. So you will get the opportunity to practice and experience what SDT looks like in real life. Just you wait. Same deal, I'm going to include this just so you know what it's like to have an intervention. So we didn't focus on this. This was an activity from years past where there's an intervention, but I'm going to do a high level review of this just so I can make a point. Someone who's going to come and talk to us in a few weeks, Dr. Resnickoff, has a intervention that he developed for African American adults with respect to healthy eating. And one thing was that he utilized in this intervention is that the moderator preference for autonomy supportive versus directive communication. This is a question of, if we give communication that's directive, if we tell you what to do, versus if you have autonomy supportive, and you'll see some examples in just a minute, which one is better for you in this intervention? So as we're moving through these weeks, I'm hoping that you're seeing that it's not just about a one-size-fits-all approach, especially with respect to interventions, especially with respect to policy or like Twitter threads, et cetera, that you're really needing to tailor and target to your specific audience. So the more you know about groups of people and what works best for them, the better this information is going to stick, the more likely people are going to engage in those behaviors. So that's what we're seeing here, that in this intervention, what Dr. Resnickoff was trying to get a sense of is, do people have preference for autonomy supportive or directive communication? So let's take a quick look at what he found. He tailored on this idea of motivation. So what the communication would look like, if you got an email or a text, for example, it might say, Tina, based on your responses to our survey, it sounds like you ... And again, based on that continuum of motivation, based on what it was that Tina responded on that survey, she would get specific feedback that was either intrinsic, introjected, or extrinsic. So let's take a look at intrinsic. Tina, based on your responses, it sounds like you have some meaningful reasons for wanting to eat better. You've told us that eating fruit and vegetables as part of a healthy diet is something you've carefully thought about and is a key part of taking responsibility for your own health. So really cool that you're able to focus really clearly on what it was that Tina's responses were and how that would relate to what she's getting for that intervention. If you had autonomy supportive language, it might be something with respect to, in general, when it comes to my health, I would rather an expert just tell me what I should do. So if you were responding high to that, I would rather an expert just tell me what I do, like completely agree or very much agree, then you might get, okay, sorry, that example, sorry about that. So the example that is related to that, I'm not sure if I cut it out, but if you have a high preference for this, then you might get language that's something along the lines of what Janae was saying, like if the CDC told me to do this, or if this person who was the head of this food council, like they told me to do this, then I'm going to do what it is that they are saying to do because I have high directive responses. So just to show you a quick example, again, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but just to show you a quick example, the way that I orient myself to a graph is by looking at all of the axes. And I first look at the title. So interaction of fruit and vegetable change with autonomy preference. So I know that I'm looking at a change score here with respect to my diet and with respect to autonomy preference. So this is the change in fruit and vegetable intake on the y-axis. So if I'm going upwards on the y-axis, I'm intaking more fruit and vegetables. So upward movement would be what we're looking for. In the control group, what we can look at and say is that even though there seems to be some difference here, it's not a huge gaping difference, right? So I don't know if that's, let's just, oh, it's in servings, right? So 0.2 of a serving, I'm not sure exactly what that is, but maybe that's a few more spoonfuls of broccoli or something of that sort. So it's not the biggest difference on earth, which means that for control folks, there's not really a huge difference what type of communication strategy one uses. But for experimental, take a look at what this is saying. If I have low autonomy, so it doesn't matter to me, I don't think that I'm really wanting to engage in this thing. The folks who are telling me to do stuff doesn't really move me at all. It doesn't matter if I'm in the control or experimental group, I'm not moved by that type of communication strategy. But the more you can target the intervention to me as someone who has high autonomy, so I think that I can do it and I'm getting those messages that are telling me that you have meaningful reasons for wanting to eat better. You've told us these things. We know that it's something you've carefully thought about. So if I have messages that are telling me that I can do it and I know why it's important to me, then my food or fruit and vegetable intake goes up quite a bit. So I've at least doubled what we see here from a control standpoint. We have doubled that distance, and we've threefold increased from whether or not those folks were control subjects to whether or not they were experimental subjects. So the long story short in this graph, and the ones that we've been showing in the past several weeks, are the more you're able to tailor an intervention to what it is that you know about people's, in this case, 3 main ingredients, the better it's going to be for them. The more, for example, fruit and vegetables they'll intake, or what it is that we're going to do, the more likely we'll see mask wearing for our population. Okay, I'm going to keep rolling. Please feel free to put stuff in the chat. We'll have a video that's coming up and I'll respond to things that are in the chat at that time. So if you do have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. We'll also have some time at the end of class, I promise, today to talk about questions. All right, so I want you to be able to hear straight from the source what it is that SDT is, because I love having folks who are the experts in this class as much as possible. So we're going to hear from one of the creators of SDT, and this is honestly the cutest video on the face of the planet. I'm really obsessed with it. Let me see if I can speed it up to 1.5 times before we, or 1.25. We're going to speed it up just a little bit so we can make sure that we get through the whole thing. It sounds fast now, but the speaker is actually pretty slow, so it should be fine. Oh man. Okay.
I love motivation. It's given me a good life. And every place I look, I see motivation, or lack thereof. So what is this thing I love, this thing called motivation? It's the energy for action. It's what gets you up in the morning and moves you through the day. Traditionally, psychologists, economists, people on the street have thought about motivation as a unitary concept. That is, they see it as something that differs only in amount. You can have less motivation or more motivation. And of course, our teachers, our bosses, our parents want us to have more motivation for the behaviors they want us to do. It's a simple and straightforward way of thinking about motivation, and I have no doubt that if you measured the amount of a person's motivation, you could predict the amount of that person's behavior. But I've never believed that the amount of behavior was the most important thing. What I think is the important thing, actually, is the quality of behavior, not the quantity. And you can't get to that by looking at the quantity of motivation. Let me give you an example to illustrate the point. You have two women who work for you. Recently, you found a bunch of new material that seemed very relevant to your work. So you give the material to both of these women, and you ask them to spend 2 hours learning it. They do, and they both put in considerable effort. The first person goes through the material, and then through it again, and through it again, and during the 2 hours, she memorizes every single fact that's contained within it. She did a lot of learning. But the second person reads it, and she's looking for the themes that are emerging. She's addressing it in a more conceptual way, trying to understand the big picture. What is this really about? And along the way, she learns a few facts, but she's interested in knowing how the facts fit together and how they relate to the big picture. The quality of their learning, even though it may have been exactly the same amount, was very different, and you can't explain that with the amount of motivation. For more than 30 years, my best friend Rich Ryan and I have been working on a theory of motivation that we call self-determination theory, SDT for short. And one of the central tenets of SDT is that you have to differentiate types of motivation. And the distinction that is most important for us is between controlled motivation and autonomous motivation. Controlled motivation is essentially the carrot and stick. When you're controlled in your motivation, you've either been seduced into behaving, perhaps by an offer of a reward, or coerced into behaving, perhaps by threat of punishment. But in either of those cases, you feel a lot of pressure. And within you is a sense of tension and anxiety. And all of those things have negative consequences for your performance and well-being. There's another thing about controlled motivation that's interesting. And that is that when your motivation is controlled, you tend to take the shortest path to the desired outcomes. Remember Enron? The directors of that company had the goal of making the company stronger and more productive. So they gave stock options to the top managers as a way of motivating them to achieve the goals. Well, those managers were pretty clever fellows, and it didn't take them long to realize that the shortest path to the outcome of making gazillions of dollars from their stock options was to artificially inflate the value of the company's stock. And we all know how well that worked out. In contrast, we have autonomous motivation. When you're autonomously motivated, you will experience a full set of volition, willingness, and choice about what you're doing. At the moment you're doing it, you're endorsing the doing of that behavior. Autonomous motivation comes in two flavors. The first has to do with interest and enjoyment. If you're interested in some activity and you enjoy doing it, The motivation is right there inside you, ready to come out and move you into action. Have you ever watched a 2-year-old play? 2-year-olds love to play. And when was the last time you heard a parent ask, how do I motivate my 2-year-old to play? It's a silly question. The motivation is right there when you're interested and enjoy the activity. The other type of autonomous motivation has to do with your deeply held values and beliefs. If you really have something that's important to you, something that you truly value, you're perfectly willing to engage in the behaviors that are consistent with that. So both of these things, these two types of autonomous motivation, are all about being fully willing to behave. There are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds now of scientific investigations that have shown when you're autonomously motivated, your behavior will be more creative. You'll be a better problem solver. When you encounter obstacles, you'll be able to think outside the box and figure out what to do about them. Your performance will be better, particularly at heuristic activities, and your emotions will be much more positive. And very importantly, autonomous motivation is associated with both physical and psychological health. So, I'm arguing that autonomous motivation is a much more effective motivation than the carrot and stick, the controlled motivation. So what does autonomy support mean, which is the way of getting people to be more autonomously motivated? You begin by taking their perspective. If you're dealing with a child, with an employee, whoever it happens to be, can you begin by trying to understand how that person sees the situation? What is the internal frame of reference? And if you do that, you're in a position to move forward from there to do whatever it is that needs to be done. It also involves providing people with choice, allowing them to be engaged in the decision-making process. It means supporting their exploration, letting them try new ways, encouraging them to be self-initiating, to be a self-starter, if you will. And very importantly, if you're asking somebody to do something, you need to provide them with a meaningful rationale. Because that way, they will understand the importance and they may actually internalize it and make it a part of their value system. So what happens when people are autonomously motivated? When teachers are autonomously motivated, their students learn in a deeper, more conceptual way. The students enjoy learning more, and they feel more confident and competent about themselves. When doctors are autonomy supportive, their patients live healthier lives. They take their medications more reliably, they eat healthier diets, and they exercise on a more regular basis. When coaches are more autonomy supportive, the research shows their athletes persist longer at the activity, they feel better about themselves while doing it, and they work together better as a team. When bosses are more autonomy supportive, their subordinates perform better at the job. They also are better adjusted in the workplace, which has important implications in terms of absenteeism, turnover, and so forth. And when parents are more autonomy supportive, their children have stronger mental health, they do better in school, and they cooperate more around the house. Now, all of these relationships that I've been talking about so far have an implicit differential in terms of authority. But many of our relationships aren't like that. We have relationships with peers, relationships that are more mutual, our romantic relationships, our best friends. There are people that argue that in order to have a high-quality relationship, you have to relinquish your autonomy in the service of the dyad. But in fact, the research shows that you won't have a high-quality relationship if you don't feel autonomous within it. What does that mean then in terms of your close relationships? Let me ask you this. Are you really interested in your partners? Do you give to them freely? Are you clear about your own needs in the relationship so they're out there on the table? And do you negotiate in good faith? And then importantly, do you do all those things fully willingly? If not, may I suggest you try it and see what happens. So what am I trying to say in all this? The take-home message is, don't ask how you can motivate other people. That's the wrong way to think about it. Instead, ask, how can you create the conditions within which other people will motivate themselves? And the answer, quite simply, is autonomy support. Thank you very much.
The absolute cutest thing on the planet. Yeah, I got you, Carly. I knew what that was. Wow, like I think it was so relatable and so helpful. And so I'm very grateful to have had that viewing. So let's see if we can keep it moving. Does anyone know what Smoke City is, by the way? Like, what is that, a city? Okay. Well, if you know, drop in the chat because I have no clue. So what we're going to do today in the spirit of what Jadrian was asking about and like, what is it that our goal is? It really depends on, to me, the relationship that you have with the individual that you're working with and what their goals are, right? So you can't just have your own goal with respect to motivation here. And I think we just got a really helpful way of thinking about that we can't just increase their motivation. We have to really think about what are the conditions by which their motivation would increase on their own. So I really thought that was helpful. So here are some of the pitfalls of behavior change, right? And again, some of the assumptions that we might come in with as any of those things that were just named. So managers, as educators, but especially as health practitioners. Well, this person ought to change. This person wants to change. This patient's health is the prime motivating factor for them. If they don't need to change, the consultation has failed. Patients are either motivated to change or not. Now is the right time to consider change. A tough approach is always best. I'm the expert. They must follow my advice, and a negotiation-based approach is best. So those are some of the pitfalls of behavior change that we, especially as providers, might be thinking about. And that was one of the examples that wasn't named in the talk. So I really want to get us to this idea of providers, whether it's in the medical field itself or as public health professionals. And so what we're going to do is head over to the Google Doc sheet. I'll drop that in the chat so that you have that. There is a reading about how to, or what tips we have for health professionals with respect to SDT. There are 12 tips that are being given to you. I want you to pick the top 3 of those tips, or we'll call them ingredients in this case, that you think are going to be the most important with respect to your population of interest and health-taking behaviors most relevant to them. So let me be clear on what I'm saying. I know we typically talk about mask wearing, and we typically talk about, sometimes when I use examples, Detroiters. I would like to enhance your autonomy today to choose whatever it is that you would like. So if there is a group of people, whether that's, I know that we were talking about folks in like rural places, or some people mentioned certain countries that they're thinking about. So if there's a population specific to you that you really care about, you can choose them today. And if there's a behavior, so if it's not mask wearing, maybe it's social distancing, maybe it's anything else that comes to your mind with respect to this time, you are autonomous and you are welcome to choose that. If you are someone where that's not coming top of mind and you don't have necessarily a population that you're necessarily interested in thinking about, or if there's a behavior that doesn't really pop to mind, you're welcome to think about Detroiters and mask wearing just as an example. So as you're reading, keep that population and keep that behavior in mind, and think about the 3 most relevant tips for that population and for that behavior. And you're going to discuss with a partner why you chose those 3 tips, why we're going to compare, or how they compare and contrast based on populations. Any questions, comments, or concerns on this one?
Yeah, so you mean by the 3 tips, you mean like 3 tips in terms of like us being some, like making them more autonomous?
So if you click that hyperlink, it's going to be 12 tips. So you're going to read through that pretty quickly just to get a sense of what this author recommends are the 12 tips for you. You're going to choose those 3 tips that are going to enhance the behaviors of your population the most. So you want to just keep a thought around SDT, what we've been talking about with autonomy, competence, and relatedness, and why the 3 things that you chose will be most relevant to the theory writ large.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, any other questions, comments, or concerns? I'm going to start putting folks in groups, but you're welcome to still ask. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, I'll actually put you in pairs just so you have more time to talk with each other, but go ahead and give that article a skim or a read. We're going to bring you back at I'm trying to get you back a little earlier, so I'll give you 10 minutes tops for this activity. So I'll let you know with 2 minutes left what to do. All right, or not what to do, but to come on back. All right, I'll see you soon. Let me just find Janae so that Janae's partner does not. Okay, so Holly, we're gonna move you to another room. All right, bye. Scott, are you there? Okay, it looks like folks are trickling back in. So for those of you that are here, just a super quick question. This is, first of all, a gift that I received this past week, this drawing. I think it's one of my favorite things on the planet. So just wanted to kind of show that off a little bit. But I have a quick question for you about who has class on Tuesdays from 12 to 1. I'm going to do a quick poll on that. So just fill in yes if you have class or nah if you don't. And we'll explain why in 1 second. Yes, Carly, I think it's fantastic. It's so me. It's got Detroit, it's got BLM. It's just fantastic. And good to hear that the activity was good as well. I'm hoping we have a little bit of time so I can hear a little bit from you, but if we don't, we'll see. All right, waiting for 6 other responses. 5, 4. Okay, so this is really good information, Janae. So we were, Janae and I are sending you all emails about, so who has class on Tuesday is the question with respect to if you have class, say yes, and if you do not have class, say no. Was that something that we need to redo then, James?
Yes, we probably do because I put yes, but I'm available. So
Okay. Well, either way it goes. So either way it goes, it looks like people have some type of conflict there, because as soon as Janae sent out one email, if you have received it already, we're trying to get folks just with some FaceTime with me or Janae. We just want to see you. We want to do a check-in with folks. And that time can be used for, like, how did you get, to the point that you are in your journey, or why does your hair grow upwards and outwards? Like, you can ask anything that you want. Within reason. So we just wanted some FaceTime, but as soon as Janae sent that out, I saw a lot of people sign up for office hours that were my alternative, so not the 12 to 1 time. So it looks like 12 to 1 might be more challenging than I thought. So we might do a when to meet just to get a sense from you all the best time. I still want to meet with that first group this week. So we're going to send this out relatively quickly, and I'm going to ask you all to respond very quickly to this when to meet, just so we could get a sense of the best time for everyone to come together. If you are free 12 to 1, you can still just give us a day to figure out the best thing to do. So give us a day. But I want to see you all. Janae wants to see you all. We want to have some FaceTime with you. Simone, I promise I'll get that question, or I'll let you all know as soon as we figure out the availability. So just hold your horses. Okay. So we'll be in touch. That's what all this is saying about the chat. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that we had time with respect to the one pager. So if you did not watch the end of class, which Janae sent the Friday announcement out about, some of your classmates and I stuck around for about 10-15 minutes to talk about the assignment. So I just want to be very clear about some of the things that are like in my mind that didn't come out of my mouth, just so that you know what a one pager is. A one pager is an executive summary of something when you're done with it. So what I showed you last week, that Embrace one pager, had some quotes from participants after it was done. We had some statistics on when we did this thing, the engage intervention. We saw this % of whatever the behavior was. So we were utilizing participant voice, we were utilizing survey results to tell all of our constituents, or to tell people who want to know more about our program, the benefits of engaging in Embrace. What I asked you all to do was to think about what are some of the things that you might want to do to, in this case, it'll be with SDT or SCT. So let's focus on SDT that we did today. We talked about 3 different tips that you might want to engage in to help people wear masks, right? This is an example. This is just an example. You just talked about 3 tips that you would want to use to help people engage in mask wearing. The question is, if you got people to do that, so if you actually did an intervention in which you had people do exactly what it is that you said that you're going to do, what are some of the outcomes that you think would happen as a result of doing what it is that you did? So if you intervened, would 80% of the people that you were trying to get to wear masks wear them by the end of your intervention? What are some of the things that they might say? So you can come up with some of the outcomes that you're anticipating if you were to intervene, if you were to utilize some of the tips or strategies from the SDT or SCT. What are some of the things that you think people would take away? You're making a one-page executive summary of what those outcomes will be. So I know I talked to people on Wednesday after class about that. I'm hoping you all got a chance to see that video, but this is my attempt to clarify just a bit more. What other questions do you have about the one pager that I can clarify right now?
So I had a you
Go
want to
ahead,
go?
Nick.
Okay. So basically, so the one pager, right? Like it kind of has like a little bit of graphics on it and then like a lot of wording. And so you're saying basically what we're supposed to put on the one pager is as if we came up with like an intervention for mask wearing based on the SDT, and then we talk about the outcomes on the one pager. So that way we get like support for more people to join our intervention kind of thing.
Perfect. That's exactly
Okay.
right.
So with the outcomes being on the one pager, are we initially talking about is the SDT coming into play when we're talking about the intervention on the one pager, or are they in the outcomes? I'm just kind of confused on that part.
So like if you were describing the intervention versus if you had outcomes for the intervention?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you could say it either way. So today, for example, if you chose 3 of the tips that were on the list, you can say something like, by increasing the autonomy of our population to do X, Y, and Z, or by helping the relatedness between blah, blah, blah. Like you can use the terms like that and then give a quick description. That can be helpful in telling people what your intervention is about. And certainly when you have a result, you would say, by increasing folks' autonomy, we saw an 80% increase in blah, blah, blah. So that's, you can certainly do it on both sides.
So are the like numbers just kind of like figurative, like we just kind of create them?
Pull it out your push. That's exactly what we're doing. Yep.
All right, cool. All right, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Someone else had a question.
Yeah, so should we try to like base our results from an intervention off of maybe something that has already been done? I mean, if we find something, like, should we try to find something similar to say like, oh, well, this had positive outcomes in this instance, so probably it'll have this kind of outcome in this instance, or can we just make it up?
Yeah, so the goal is actually not to focus as much on the intervention, though, again, what we just did in the 12 tips down to 3, you can literally take something like that and say the tips that we think are going to make a lot of sense, we did it, and these are the outcomes. So I don't want you to focus as much on intervention right now. That's not the goal of this stage of where we are in the class, but really to think about how you would talk about results from something like that type of intervention. So how do you talk about results? How do you include the terms autonomy, relatedness, competence, for example, or self-efficacy? How do you demonstrate that people have actually taken those things up would be the goal here. So you don't have to spend a lot of time going through research. You don't have to look at some of the things that have already been done. If you want to do that, by all means, go for it. But you do not have to spend a lot of time looking at what other people did so that you would implement that.
Okay, thank you.
Taz, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, like, so me and my partner that we just did the activity with, we picked 3 tips and we did Detroit, like mask wearing in Detroit, and we picked one tip from each of like autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So for like the one pager, could we basically like say like, could we basically put statistics like, oh, like because we did this within our intervention, like communicating mindfully, it helps like Detroiters like want to wear masks, or, like et cetera, or like, and then like explain that for each like tip, or would that be me doing it wrong?
No, that's totally fine. So you can literally use some of the stuff today from that list. You can make up whatever it is that you want. It's really just the goal of how do you communicate some of those constructs effectively. So we're just going to be looking for, can you talk about some of the things that you would want to do and how it looks on the other side of it, that we were able to increase competence and it looked like this. That's really
Okay,
helpful.
so sorry. So this is like, this one pager is aimed towards like other health practitioners.
It can be toward, so our one pages are geared toward the population with whom we work and other practitioners, yes. So it's instead of an academic paper that has 20 pages of jargon, it's really about to the people and to the folks who might be implementing it and uptaking it. What does this look like?
So I'm sorry.
No worries. And for
Basically,
folks that
like,
you have to go, by all means, go ahead. Yep.
so basically this isn't like our other one, like trying to get Detroiters to like wear masks. It's more so like, how can we tell other people to effectively communicate to Detroiters how to wear masks so that they want to wear masks, if that makes sense?
This would be if you had 100 people that you were working with as your population and you tried to do some things with them to increase their competence, to increase their autonomy, to increase their relatedness. You did that stuff with them. And then on the back end of it, maybe at the end of a month, you saw, did 80% of them increase their behaviors? Did 25 people engage in something? So you're just telling about the results at the end of that month for the end of that 100 people. That's an example. But you would be telling us by doing this type of strategy, these are some of the outcomes that we saw with this group, so that the other 750,000 Detroiters who weren't a part of it, when they look at this, they're now like, oh, I too can, have these same type of outcomes. If I did something like that, I should now wear a mask. So you're just telling the other people in your population, like, this is what we can do for you as well, if you were to follow these steps.
All right, thank you so much.
Oh, sorry. Dr. Anderson, so in that example, the 25 and the 75 are made up numbers, so we can make up those numbers.
Totally, pull them out your tush. Yeah.
Similarly, like we're making up our outcome measures. Can we also make up like our interventions, or do they have to be interventions rooted in science?
Make them up. Make everything up, except we just want to hear what you have to say about those constructs. But everything else, you can totally make it up.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
The constructs, that's just the core we talked about, like the autonomy and competence and relatedness, those three.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other burning questions?
Hey,
Are there
Dr.
any-
Anderson.
oh.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, where is the example of your one pager again? I forgot where you mentioned it would be.
It's in the PowerPoint that was sent last week, and I also just dropped it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other than it being one page long, are there any other formatting things that we need to follow?
No, just take a look at the example from the weekly assignment thing, the Google Doc, and that'll give you just a quick formatting, but there's nothing else around it. There are some requirements that are in the syllabus with respect to the assignment. They should also be in the Canvas around it. So I think like one picture, one stat, something like that.
Yeah, I've seen those. I didn't know if it was like Times New Roman or anything like that. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, folks?
I had a quick question about SDT. I was wondering, so how do the different types of motivation relate to the 3 psychological needs?
Yeah, you know what, Megan, it's a great question. It's something that I was actually trying to think a lot about today. I think that the 3 psychological needs make up the construct of motivation. So if I drew it out, I would have motivation as like a rectangle, and then those 3 constructs that make up what motivation is. But that's actually less explained. But they use the term motivation like almost instead of any one of those constructs independently. So I think it's what those 3 things make up. But that's the best explanation that I have. I'll take a look more into it because I was wondering the same thing, but that's the best that I could explain today.
Okay, so when we do the infographic, the constructs we should focus on are the 3 needs, and we don't need to do the different types of motivation.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jadrian, you got something?
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out, so how would the tips, I guess, fit in with the 3 basic needs that we have to use? Like, would those go on a specific area? Like, I'm trying to just trying to gather everything. Like, how do you take these 3 tips, I mean the tips that we have, the 3 basic needs, and how do we combine it all together to kind of formulate this one pager?
Yeah, the tips are really just examples. So if people were struggling with like, what would it look like? How do I come up with that? There were 12 tips, and I thought that most of them related pretty well to those 3 different constructs. So if you were struggling trying to come up with ideas for any of those 3, I think that the tips would actually help you to think about how to talk about them, or how to do something about any of these behaviors that we're talking about. But you don't have to use them. So the tips are not something you have to do. The real focus is, how do you get people's behavior to change? And after you implement something like that strategy, how would you anticipate people changing from it? So if you did not implement that strategy, maybe 20% of Detroiters, as an example, would be wearing a mask. But now you've implemented one of the strategies that you came up with, maybe on the tip sheet, and now they're doing it at 80%. So you're just talking like that. You're trying to get people to shift their behaviors, and you're just demonstrating it on this one pager.
Okay. And so basically, from my understanding, is the one pager is for, like, I think you were telling Taz that is for like, I guess, more of our organizers, and trying to show them and show, I guess, the population that this is our success story based on like past intervention. So so my population, for example, would be I guess those tough Southerners / Trump supporters who just believe that, mask wearing is just like an infringement of their rights. So basically, for this one, if we was to look at autonomy and look at choice, we'd be like, yes, everyone, although it's your choice, the people who made a choice, they were successful because they wore a mask, and they, didn't catch COVID, or, it lowered their chances. So although it is a choice, make the right choice, or something like that. So
that's
it something like
that's
that?
Beautiful. That you got it right there. Like that's your intervention title. Make the right choice. Like, that's beautiful. Run with that. Run completely with that. Yes.
Okay, so I think I got a basic understanding of what's going on.
Yeah. No, it sounds good. Okay, for folks remaining, I actually have a 2:30. So give me, if you have a super quick question, super quick, go. You won't be able to do the assignment without it. Super quick. 5, 4, 3. Oh, y'all are chatting? Is that what's happening? Or no, just thanks. Okay, anything else? I gotta go.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I might have started a discussion on HC 600 by mistake. So if you get a notification, I sort of got classes mixed up and started a discussion in our group instead of another group. So I'm sorry for that.
Okay, no worries. As long as you're not like telling us we suck, that's really all that matters. Thank you. I gotta go, y'all. Take care, okay? Bye.